Hey y'all, welcome back to another hunting ammo ballistics gel test. I've got a big one for you today. We're gonna be shooting Remington Corelokt Tipped in 308 Winchester, but not just one, not just two. We're gonna be shooting all three bullet weights. I've got the 150, 165, and 180 grain loads. We're gonna be putting them all head to head. And here are your boxes for that Remington Corelokt Tipped 308 Winchester loads, the 150, 165, and 180 grain. We're gonna be putting them all head to head against each other. All of the boxes have the same icons, deer, elk, and hog, which is kind of interesting with the different bullet weights. Regardless, let's go ahead and flip it around to the back of the box and take a look at their promo information. So there's your promo info. Feel free to stop, pause, and read all that if you would like. It's the same information on all of the boxes regardless of bullet weight, except of course for velocity. And velocity-wise, your 150s are stated at 2840 feet per second. Your 165s, 2,700 feet per second, and then your 180s, 2,640 feet per second. It'll be interesting to see how fast we get out of the 22-inch barrel of my Ruger American. Let's go ahead and pull some out and take a look. And I did check, the 150s, 165s, and 180s all appear identical, so I'm just gonna show you the 150s here for reference. And here they are, your sharp little green tip. A little bit dingy on the bullet, no big deal. Let's go shoot the stuff and see how it does. And my test rifle today is my Ruger American Standard, chambered in 308 Winchester, of course. It has a 22-inch barrel. I did have it threaded so I could use a Silencer Co. Hybrid 46 suppressor. And coming on back, I've got it topped off with a Vortex Diamondback 4-16x42 scope. Definitely helps see the gel blocks down there. And of course, I've got one of my handmade leather cartridge cuffs on the buttstock. Check out my website, masonleather.com. I would love to make you one. And I've also got one of my super thick Latigo leather slings on there. Those are also available on my website. And coming around to the other side, I've got to show you my whitetail deer design. And real quick, if you're watching this video anytime around when it came out, I'm having a huge sale on my website, masonleather.com. Go check it out and get yourself something.
We'll be taking 3 shots from 100 yards, firing into 10% ballistics gel that has been calibrated to meet the FBI's ballistics testing protocol. And while ballistics gel isn't an exact proxy for big game, it does provide a repeatable medium through which to test various bullets and ammo against each other. After the shots, we'll examine bullet expansion, weight retention, penetration, and velocity. My goal is to provide hunters like you and I with the most objective information possible to help us make the best choice for our particular hunting situation. The ballistics gel in this video has been sourced from Clear Ballistics. You can find a link in the description.
So let's go ahead and shoot it. And here are those velocities for the 150 grain Corelokt Tipped load out of the 308, minimum 2733, maximum 2793 for an average of 2762. And here we have the velocities for the 165 grain Corelokt Tipped, 2556 for the minimum, 2599 for the max, 2582 for the average. And finally, we have the velocities for the 180 grain Corelokt Tipped load, minimum 2478, maximum 2544 for an average of 2513. And we'll get into the velocity more here in just a second. And we are down at the blocks after shooting the 150 grain and 165 grain Corelokt Tipped loads out of the 308 Winchester. We did catch all 3 bullets from both the 150 and the 165 grain load. So let's go ahead and go over it. I'm going to shoot the 180s here in a second. Penetration wise on the 150s, that's about 21 inches, and these two are right at about 22.5 inches. And it does look like they held together pretty good. It looks like they mushroomed pretty good. Seems like good overall performance. Coming on back to the first block, these things were slapping these blocks around. Definitely dump some energy up front. They start to expand very rapidly about 1 inch in. Big old wound track, and this is 3 different wound tracks, of course. Starts to taper off at about the 7-inch mark. Keeps on going, keeps on going. The wound track is about finished up by the 12-inch mark, and then they just keep on penetrating on through. well past, well, not well past, but a little bit past the 20-inch mark that I like to see. I think these did pretty good. And here's another view of those 150s in the gel. You can see the expansion. It'll be interesting to dig these out and see how much retained weight they have. And then on to the 165s, a little bit deeper penetration. We've got these two are both at right about the 25-inch mark, and then this one went deeper to about the 28-inch mark. And these also look to have expanded very nicely and held together for the most part as well. Coming on back to the first block, same story. They start expanding very rapidly, a little bit deeper on these ones, about the 1.5-inch mark. Big nasty wound track all the way back to about the 9 to 10-inch mark. Then it starts to taper off and they just keep on penetrating. Seems like really good performance from both the 150s and 165s. I'm going to go shoot the 180s right now. And we are down at the blocks after shooting those 180 grain Corelokt tip bullets out of the 308 Winchester. We did capture all 3 bullets, and interestingly enough, they are all at basically exactly the same penetration. There's actually 2 right there. They're not touching, they're just close to each other. And then the third right there, they're all at 25.5 inches of penetration. Very nice, very consistent. And I came around to the other side of the block to show you, it looks like they mushroomed very nicely. 2 of the bullets maintained their direction of travel. One of them did flip around backwards. It's really not that big of a deal, just an observation. And coming on back to the first block, similar to the 150s and 165s, but the wound cavity to me looks a little bit less explosive, which kind of only makes sense. These are the heavier of the 3 bullet weights, so I wouldn't expect to see quite as much explosive wound track up front. Nevertheless, it's very good, and it looks like it starts expanding very rapidly at about the 1.25-inch mark. Comes on back, and then it tapers off at about the 12 to 13-inch mark. Nice wound track, and there is a little bit of fragmentation in there. It doesn't look like a whole ton. For the most part, it looks like the bullets held together. So let's go ahead and dig them out and we'll take a look. All right, y'all, we're back in the lab. We've got all the bullets recovered from the ballistics gel. Let's go ahead and talk about it. First, we're going to hit weight retention. Because I've got so many bullets to go over as compared to most of my videos, I usually just do 1 load per video. We've got 3 loads in this one. I'm just going to hit all the numbers and then talk about it at the end during my final thoughts. So let's hit weight retention. For the 150 grain bullets, we saw 103, 108, and 106 grains for an average of 106 grains. That's 59% retained weight. For the 165 grain bullets, we saw 120, 121, and 127 grains. That's an average of 123 grains retained weight, and that's 69% weight retention. For the 180 grain bullets, we saw 133, 134, and 135 grains for 134 grains on average, and that is 75% weight retention. So weight retention wise, they actually did kind of what I would expect them to do, which is the lighter bullet retained a little bit less, going all the way up to the heavier bullet retaining a bit more. It makes sense. And being essentially ballistic tip bullets, I'm actually kind of happy with the weight retention. I don't expect these things to retain a ton of their weight, but they did retain the majority, which I'm happy with. Moving on to expansion, for the 150s, we saw 0.58, 0.58, and 0.64 inches for an average of 0.6 inches expanded diameter, and that's 1.9x expansion. For the 165s, we saw 0.56, 0.57, and 0.65 inches for an average of 0.59 inches expanded diameter, and that works out to also 1.9x expansion, exactly the same. And for the 180s, we saw 0.62, 0.64, and 0.67 inches for an average of 0.64 inches expanded diameter, which is the largest of the bunch, working out to 2.1x expansion. So all 3 of these loads, and you can see in the picture right here, they're all very, very similar, are hovering right around that 2x mark that I like to see for medium game hunting ammo. And considering how consistent the expansion was across all of these bullets, they're nice and uniform, the entire circumference is expanded, I'm pretty happy with it. Alright, on to velocity. For the 150s, our high was 2793, our low was 2733, for an average of 2762 versus the factory build velocity of 2840, so we came in 78 feet per second slow versus box spec. For the 165s, our high was 2600, our low was 2557 for an average of 2582 versus the box spec of 2700 feet per second, so we came in 118 feet per second slow. And then for the 180s, our high was 2545, Our low was 2478 for an average of 2513 versus box spec of 2640. So we came in 127 feet per second slow, which is getting into the realm of a lot slower than I would like to see versus box spec. Across all the factory ammo that I have tested, 50 to 75 feet per second slower is sort of par for the course. Once you get over 100 feet per second slower, that's a bit ridiculous. And I'm going to point out again that I'm shooting these out of a 22-inch barreled Ruger American, 22 inches and shorter being by far the most popular barrel length in use for .308 Winchester. I don't know what barrel length the factories are using, but whatever it is not what is in most common use in the field. And that's why I present this velocity data to you, so you can know what's actually going on. And now real quick, we'll hit impact velocity. So how fast were these bullets going at 100 yards when they impacted the target? Now this is an estimate, it's based on a formula, but I do use inputs that are factory provided, so the numbers should be pretty darn close. The 150 grain load should be going about 2,569 feet per second at impact. The 165 should be going about 2,401 feet per second, and the 180s should be going about 2,337 feet per second at impact down there at 100 yards. And that's just more information for you. And now on to penetration, and I think these Corelokt Tipped bullets actually did pretty good across the board, and I'm really liking what I'm seeing for penetration. So for the 150s, we saw 21 inches, 22.5 inches, and 22.5 inches for an average of about 22 inches of penetration. That's over the 20-inch mark that I like to see for medium game hunting, and very consistent. For the 165s, we saw a bit more penetration, 25 inches, 25 inches, and 28 inches for an average of about 26 inches of penetration. Nice and deep. And then for the 180s, it was incredibly consistent. 25.5 inches across the board for all three. That's the average. Almost the same as the 165s. And it makes sense that it's actually a little bit shallower than the 165s because we did get a little bit more expansion for whatever reason. So all in all, penetration-wise, the Corelokt Tipped bullets did about what I would expect, meaning the 150s were a bit shallower, the 165s and 180s were a bit deeper. But it was interesting to see the 180s get a bit more expansion and penetrate a little less. I mean, it happens. And real quick, we'll hit kinetic energy. The 150s had 2,540 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. The 165s had 2,442 foot-pounds at the muzzle. And the 180s had 2,524 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. So pretty similar across all of them, the 165s being a little bit less. And a quick announcement before we get to my final thoughts. If you'd like early access to my videos weeks and even months in advance of everyone else, become a channel member. The links will be in the video description and the pinned comment. Thanks, y'all. All right, y'all, it's time for my final thoughts on the Remington Corelokt Tipped loads out of the .308 Winchester, the 150s, 165s, and 180s, all three. So all in all, I think all of these bullets did very, very well. Weight retention is honestly about what I would expect from essentially a ballistic tip cup and core bullet. They maintained a majority of their weight while shedding quite a bit, but what was left did hold together and mushroomed very, very well. And that's across all three weights. Expansion-wise, all of them were close to that 2x mark that I like to see. The two weights that were 1.9x, the 150s and 165s, I wish would have expanded a little bit more, closer to the 2.1x we saw out of the 180s. Interesting that the heavier bullet actually expanded a little bit more. I mean, stranger things have happened, but all in all, I'm happy with it for the type of bullets that these are. And also keep in mind the expansion was very uniform and concentric. It's not just a shard, jagged off left or right. The whole circumference of the bullet was expanded. It's going to create a nice wound channel. And then penetration-wise, all of them did excellent. They're right there in that mid 20-inch range, between 22 and 26 inches across weights. And that's going to do anything you need these to do in the medium game category. All in all, I think they performed very well for what they are. And if I were having to make the choice between one of these bullet weights to hunt with, I would probably just choose the weight that shoots the most accurately out of my rifle because the performance difference in the other metric categories just isn't that big of a deal. And this ammo wouldn't be my first choice for larger game like elk and stuff like that. So, in the white-tailed deer type category, all of these are going to do excellent for you. If you've used Corelokt Tipped ammo in .308 Winchester or any other caliber, let us know how you liked it in the comments. And check out my website masonleather.com and get yourself some leather gear handmade by me just for you. I've been handcrafting leather gear for hunters for over a decade, and I would love to make you something. And there are hundreds of reviews on my website, so you can see what real hunters have to say about their mason leather gear. And also tons of photos showing all the customizable options, including name, initial, and caliber stamping, as well as wild game designs and more. Everything is handmade by me right here in the USA. I would love to be a part of your hunt through my leather gear. And it helps support this channel, so I can bring you more hunting ammo ballistics gel tests, and lots of other cool stuff in the future. The link will be in the video description and the pinned comment, or you can just type masonleather.com into your web browser.
And click one of these cards for more hunting ammo ballistics gel tests.